They could only see me now with all my YouTube subscribers. Wouldn't be making fun of my fake Jordans. All right, today we're discussing human health and pollution. And we're also going to get into some disease stuff, which is a load of fun. So if you'll turn in your book to 484 maybe. All right, lots of diseases, and why do you, 474, yeah. Why do you think we're studying diseases in environmental science? That sounds like a biology or an anatomy topic.
I guess the diseases that are caused by environmental factors.
Yeah, there's a lot of, pollution aspects that go into transmission of diseases. So either you've got pollutants that are released in the environment that are causing health problems, or you've got diseases that are waterborne and they're moving through the water system and water that people consume, and it's making them sick. I got a really good video on, I think it's cholera we'll watch tomorrow, on basically how like diarrhea kills 4 million people in the world. And I know it seems like, man, I think I could really avoid that. Well, you live in a place where you have clean drinking water and a place for all of your sewage to go. So really, you need to be able to get rid of one thing that's really safely, which would be poop. Urine, sterile, and it's not that bad. What else? Dishwasher, your washing clothes, your shower. Most other stuff is pretty sanitary, I would think, or sterile at least. But poop has a lot of stuff in it. So we talked about the anal swabs used for COVID, like in China. Did we talk about that? Yeah. And so, like, there's a lot, when you get sick, there's a lot of stuff that comes out your back end. And if you don't have somewhere to just properly dispose of that poo, then that's going to run, and it runs off in a lot of places, no pun intended, into bodies of water, and people that live downstream get to consume and drink that water, and then that becomes a problem. They get sick, and then you get sick, and you have to drink more contaminated water, and you get more sick, and then a lot of people wind up dying from that. So we'll see some of the causes, got a pretty good short video on that, and then we'll also see some solutions for that, which I think is also very important. I did see some unique video. It was on like a TikTok or reel or something the other day, and a guy had some like super nasty water, and I want to say it was a laundry company had come up with a way to clean water, and basically like this super nasty water, it looked like almost like just raw sewage. He put this tablet or maybe a powder in, I can't remember, but it caused all the stuff to kind of in the water to clump together, to settle to the bottom, and then basically there was some chlorine in it, I think, that killed any other pathogens to make water safe. And so I think one little pill or packet, you could use it to treat 2.5 gallons. So, and I think there were some very simple constituents in that. So maybe that's a solution for people like we saw in Indonesia, where they have a lot of pollutants and unsafe drinking water issues. Now, I don't think it's going to remove what?
Bacteria.
It's going to kill bacteria. Mercury, yeah. So mercury, lead, some of those heavy metals. I don't know if those kind of treatments remove any of that material, because you're talking about very small, like parts per million oftentimes, or even smaller than that. So hopefully one day we'll have it where the entire world has clean drinking water and a safe place to go to the potty. One can dream. All right, 54. It can be difficult to establish a cause and effect between pollutants and human health issues because humans experience exposure to a variety of pollutants and chemicals. Now, in the second video we're going to watch at the end, we're going to go back and talk about thalidomide. Actually, I'll turn back to 473. So thalidomide we discussed a little bit yesterday because it causes birth defects, like being born with short arms or no legs or short legs. It really affects the development of the appendages. From what I could see and read about, I don't think that there were a lot of neurological or other issues, but for something about it somehow affected the developmental process of those appendages. And at the end of the video, it talks about how the drug company, this company out of Germany, was basically denying that their drug had anything to do with this. So there's a term in science, or there's a phrase, it's called correlation doesn't equal causation. So you can have a correlation between two things. Like if you have more, fertilizer in the soil, then your plants grow more. Well, there's a correlation there, but how do you determine that one is causing the other? So you've got a variety of other factors like water and humidity and sunlight and all these other things. So how do you determine if that correlation that you're seeing between the two things is a cause and effect relationship? Well, yeah, you got to do lots of testing. And so it's very difficult, though, Sophie, when you're talking about like chemicals that may be in the water or in the air, things that people are consuming and bringing in because you have many other chemicals. You know how when we test stuff, we want to isolate one thing. Well, when you have a variety of chemicals that people are exposed to, it's hard. Yeah, it's difficult to isolate it. And so, one, you have to use a little common sense. You have to look at how much of a correlation there is and do a lot of testing. So that's one thing that they were arguing. Just because there's this correlation doesn't mean our stuff's causing it. And you see kind of the same thing out of the Roundup lawsuit in California where, a jury found that Roundup is liable for causing, what's that cancer? Non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And so a lot of people were getting money for that. So Roundup, I'm sure, was arguing like just because there's this correlation doesn't mean our stuff is what's causing it because people are exposed to other chemicals as well. So that's one thing that's very difficult to argue and determine without some serious testing and a little bit of time. All right, number 55, pathogens. No, hold on, that's not it. Oh, dysentery. Dysentery is caused by untreated drinking water untreated sanitary water in streams and rivers. Is that right?
How do you spell dysentery?
Dysentery. Untreated sewage, sorry. dysentery. So when you have untreated drinking water, so you're consuming water out of a stream or creek because the sewage was not previously treated. So we talked about, we've got a lot of sewage that goes into the river over here. But before it goes in, it goes through a pretty strict process of breakdown of sewage, chlorine, UV light before it goes back in. So downstream, people aren't consuming sewage that we have put out, okay? So dysentery is one of those diseases where people drink water, there's pathogens in the water, and they're consuming those, and it's making them sick and giving them diarrhea and throwing up, and it's hard to have enough food and nourishment and hydration because of that, because you're continuously, the more you put in, the more you squirt out, and the more problems you have. So two things really have to happen. One, you have to treat sewage, and two, you have to find ways to make sure the water that you're drinking is treated in some form or fashion, either through boiling it or some type of chemical treatment process, okay? Number 56, mesothelioma. Mesothelioma, they used to run commercials about this all the time. What does mesothelioma cause?
Skin cancer.
What kind of cancer?
Skin cancer.
Nope.
Lung cancer.
What? Lung cancer. And it's caused because of exposure to
Radiation.
asbestos. Good. Some of y'all watch these commercials. Watch more TV, you'll learn more. You do what?
They come on like all the time.
Yeah, back in like a few years ago, it'd be all the time you see these commercials rolling. Anyway, so asbestos was used as an insulator. We talked about that, insulation, in buildings. We talked about there were some over at the middle school here, I think in the gym, y'all said. Is that right? Did they shut the gym down or did they just, what'd they do?
I think it was closed down for a period of time.
Did they clean it out or did they just seal it up?
I really feel like they should have done. I can't remember though.
Because if they were to clean it out, I mean, they would have to go in and suck all of the insulation out of the ceiling. They may have to remove the tiles and replace it all. It's a pretty expensive process. I may have told y'all we had some asbestos tiles, like floor tiles, in our house that we bought, and we had to have a company come in and rip up the tiles and kind of get the material and mastic underneath that was kind of holding it down. And the kitchen's our kitchen's small. It's probably like 15 by 16 or something like that. It's almost a square. It's not very big. And I think it cost, I want to say almost a couple grand for them to come in and do that, which tiles would have been easy to pop up. But just the process of taking and removing the asbestos, they had to wear like full hazmat suits and fully ventilate the house when they were doing it. So anyway, it's an expensive process because it's so dangerous in causing that mesothelioma, that type of lung cancer. All right, next one, 57, respiratory problems. And overall lung function can be impacted by elevated levels of tropospheric ozone. So, tropospheric ozone is found where? Where's the troposphere? Okay, so troposphere is down close to the Earth. We're in the troposphere. It's where the weather's found. It's down close. Oh, tropospheric ozone is bad. What is ozone made of? O3. Okay. How is tropospheric ozone produced? This was in our last unit.
Sulfur,
Yeah, the sun and like.
photochemical smog.
Photochemical smog. Good job. So ozone is produced in that photochemical smog. Causes respiratory issues. You see this a lot in bigger cities. I want to say, I think in the summertime, if you live in a bigger city, like in Birmingham, they do this, Atlanta, somewhere like that, and throughout the U.S., I'm sure, they will post like ground level ozone warnings. So, and that's specifically put out for like people with sensitive respiratory systems. You know what I'm talking about, Jeremiah?
Yeah,
You heard? Yeah. So, I mean, I've heard of James Spann talk about that in Birmingham. Like when it's really hot out and a lot of people are driving around, like he'll talk about like ground level ozone levels are elevated, and, you know, be careful if you're going out because it could cause issues. This may be something, you know, if you have respiratory issues, you may consider before you move somewhere when you grow up and move off. And, you know, when you have kids, that may be something you have to consider if you live somewhere where, you know, where you live, there's respiratory issues. And so it's just something to have to take into consideration. Now, ozone is normally found where? Stratosphere, good. And ozone in the stratosphere is good because it
Protects us from the sun's rays.
blocks out harmful UVB and UVC rays. When we get to the next unit on climate change and earth changes, I can't remember what it is. Whatever this next unit is. Hold on a second. Global change is what they call it. When we get to global change, I've got a couple of sensors for UVB and UVC rays. And so we'll go outside and we'll do some testing and see, like, you know, how do your sunglasses impact your UV exposure of your eyes? Or your clothing, like how good is it at blocking out UV rays? So these are things to consider, especially if you have a history of skin cancer or very fair skin or outside a lot. Or if you just like me and you buy cheap sunglasses and you go outside. Cheap sunglasses are worse, or I would say cheap sunglasses that don't block out UV rays are worse than not wearing sunglasses. Why? Do what? I don't know if it magnifies it, but what are your, so if it does make things look darker, so your eyes are going to do what? They're going to dilate. So if it's not, it's one thing that if you're, you know, it's darker and you're not seeing much, but if that opens up your, you know, dilates your eyes and lets more UV light in, then you're actually, it could be worse for you, and like, because that UV light can get in and damage your retina. That's why you're not supposed to like stare at the sun. So it can damage or hurt your sensitive skin cells in the back of your eye. So that's one thing to consider when you're buying glasses. You want some that are for sure blocking out those UVB and UVC rays. I think UVA they're not blocked out as much. I think those are more associated with aging. Anyway.
What was that sun thing that happened like 3 years ago?
Oh yeah, we had an eclipse.
Yeah.
Everybody had those glasses. Y'all had to get like y'all had to sign a waiver.
Yeah. I accidentally took mine off and looked at the sun.
You couldn't like stare directly at it. You
I looked at it.
Right. The thing that was most disappointing about it was it wasn't like a really full eclipse.
Yeah.
Like nothing around us got darker, like how we did.
You can just see a little bit of it.
I had
Well,
my-
it's the best we can do.
I
Maybe
had my
next time.
glasses on outside, and I was looking up, and it was so dark, and I didn't know where the sun was, but I wanted to see it like with my glasses. So I took the sunglasses off, and I said, "Where's the sun?" And I looked into the sun.
You're probably gonna die. Okay, maybe not. So yeah, I was walking around that whole day like playing Total Eclipse of the Heart, Black Hole Sun. What else? Anyway, it was a fun day. Okay, let's look at the next one. What do we got? Respiratory issue. Yeah.
Has Alabama ever been in the pathway of the cast of the shadow for the solar eclipse before?
I'm sure it has. I don't know when. It's a good question, Donovan. Good question. I'm sure there'll be one sometime in your lifetime. Just hold on for us, okay?
They're not as
Don't die young.
they're rare. They're a lot rarer.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know how much though. You should look that up. All right, pathogens and infectious diseases. Let's go to 58. Pathogens, first of all, what are pathogens?
A disease causing agent.
Very good. A disease-causing agent. So this could be, now, not all bacteria are pathogens, probably like less than 1%, but bacteria do cause a lot of diseases, okay, the ones that do. Viruses, some protists, like those amoebas that get in your brain when you swim in the lake and kill you. And another group called prions. Those are protein infectious particles that cause like mad cow disease. So these are all different types of infectious diseases that are disease-causing agents that can cause harm or death to a person. So number 58, pathogens adapt to take advantage of new opportunities to infect and spread throughout human populations. What could we substitute for adapt there? Evolve, good. Now, we see this really evident with COVID coming out, right? So we have the original COVID strain or COVID virus coming from China. I still think it came from a lab in China, but there's a lot of speculation. I don't know if the Chinese will ever give us the real skinny on that, but there's still some speculation there. Anyway, and so it spread around the world, and so what kind of variants do we have? You might know?
African,
Okay, South African,
the European.
the UK one, well, Chinese kind of the original. There's a California one now I read about the other day. So, and then there's a Brazilian one. So there's at least 5 major strains that they've talked about that have evolved in different areas. Andrew, wake up. But some important plot points here. So we see this constant evolution of the virus. Now, what does this mean for you guys going forward?
Be safe.
We're gonna experience new variants of different
Yeah, that means that this virus is never going away. So it's going to constantly evolve and it's going to be around. I can't imagine that you don't have to deal with COVID at any point in your lifetime. Like we're like, oh, no more COVID.
Because, like, you know how we get flu shots and things?
Yeah, and the flu shots have different variants in it. I suspect that vaccines for COVID will probably be the same way. Yeah, go ahead.
Flu B was a big thing.
Which one was B? Was that the swine flu?
No,
No, it was H1N1.
So I remember I was in elementary school, or no, it was in 7th grade, 2016, because I got flu B. And it was a new variant that was affecting kids, and like a handful of kids died in the country.
Yeah.
In 16?
School is still,
Yeah,
they
in
were giving
middle
us permission
school.
to leave school and stuff like that.
Yeah, I remember that. They were letting people be out for the flu, and they've never really done that
My
before.
cousin got flu B.
They were really worried. Y'all may remember this. Y'all were younger. Like in 2011, I think, the swine flu. So, the flu normally, it can kill younger people, but it typically kills more older people. And so it didn't kill as many older people because there was another swine flu similar to it back in the, I want to say, late 60s or early 70s. So you had this like worry about a pandemic because you had this new strain come out of, I think it came out of Mexico and some pig farms where they traced it back to. There's a good, if y'all listen to the Radio Lab podcast, there's a podcast on like, what do they call it? Patient Zero. And so basically they talk about like how, like the swine flu, they talk about HIV, like how you trace these pathogens back to like the first patient that got them. And so then hopefully from there, like where did they get them? How did they get them? How did it cross over from pigs to humans? Ebola is a big one. They think that comes from bats. There's a lot of stuff they think comes from bats. And then HIV, they traced it back to the early 1900s in some forest in the Congo. So it's pretty cool to listen to how like they go back and like they're looking at the genetics and mutations and see like how long it took before it jumped to humans and like how did that process take place. Yeah.
Do you at the very end of Contagion, they have a scene that shows going back into finally like patient zero.
They're fine. I haven't seen that all the way through. I need to watch it. Yeah.
We should watch just the ending clip because it's really good. It goes back to a bat and then a pig and yeah.
That's kind of, I think, I'm surprised that the Chinese government hasn't just said like, hey, this is what happened and this is where, we know it, because I feel pretty confident they know where it started. Anyway, I'm sure we'll find out one day. What was I going to say? Oh, HIV. They did a really interesting study where they looked at, I think the first person that they've got evidence for HIV is in somewhere in Central Africa in the late 50s. They found some blood and they were testing blood. And they looked at that person's blood and his HIV and compared it to, I think, HIV from some type of primate, like a monkey. And they were able to determine, like, there's so many mutations between them that, like, on average, there's a mutation happens so many, like, every year. And they were able to determine, like, well, how far back it jumped from primates over to people. And so that's how they were kind of looking back at like where it started. And a lot of people eat bush meat, and so they probably think, somebody in so-and-so jungle in the Congo killed a monkey and ate it, and that it got transferred over to them. So it's just an interesting way of like how we track diseases, how we look for them, how do we fight them off. They're constantly evolving. I think you guys are probably going to see, like a booster shot every year is probably what's going to happen. And I am hopeful, though. Somebody mentioned this. They said, COVID's not super bad for young people. I mean, really, if you're under 20, it's probably less likely to kill you than the flu. And somebody made the suggestion that, like, it may be like when kids are born, COVID strains are still going around. You get COVID, like you get a cold or something, you get a little bit sick, and you get those kind of as you get older. But by the time you get older, when COVID's like affecting people really, badly right now and killing a lot of people, that you've already been exposed to enough of it that it doesn't really hurt you. So maybe that's something that will happen. Who knows? I guess we'll find out. I guess it's so interesting. You guys are young, and you'll get to tell your kids like, I remember when COVID was a thing and it just started and blah blah blah. Anyway,
How you talk to your children?
Do what?
Is that how you talk to your children?
Yes, like a very old person. Yes, that's how I talk to them. All right. Number 59. No. Specific pathogens can occur in many environments regardless of appearance of sanitary conditions. So even though we think here in the U.S. and all the developed countries are super duper sanitary, we still have transmission of lots of diseases, right? So things get passed from person to person. Interactions between people will get passed around. So regardless of sanitary conditions, diseases can still get passed. Some things are passed via mosquitoes and stuff. So even really no matter how sanitary you make things, you're still going to have some of those diseases that get out. Number 60. Now, climate change. As the earth gets warmer, mosquitoes are going to go where? Well, I would say mosquito-borne diseases. There's already mosquitoes like running around Alaska. They look like they're the size of birds. That's not really true, but they're pretty big. Do what? Yeah. My dad's got this shirt that says like the Alaskan state bird, got a big mosquito on it. Those things are crazy up there. Anyway, where was I going with that? Oh, mosquito-borne diseases are going to spread from the equator out north and south. Why? It's getting warmer. So, as equatorial type climate zones spread north and south into what currently are subtropical and temperate zones, like where we live, pathogens, infectious diseases, and associated vectors are spreading into these areas where diseases have not previously known to occur. Things like, I don't ever remember early when I was growing up, what's the Zika, what's the other one, West Nile virus. So those two, those are hanging around and being spread in some different areas, especially West Nile is a problem around here. And so those diseases will continue to spread and go throughout the world. Now, one thing y'all need to know, what is a vector?
Something learned in math
Oh, something with magnitude and direction.
And nobody cares about vectors in math. What is vector in this context?
A variable.
It causes something?
Something that's that.
A vector is a means of transmission. So like mosquitoes for malaria. Okay, so when you see that term vector in this talking about infectious disease, it's talking about the means of transmission. How is it carried? Okay. Anyway, number 61. Poverty-stricken low-income areas often lack sanitary waste disposal. That means a way to get rid of the poo. Okay, and have contaminated drinking water supplies. So when I'll give you an example. When I went to Ecuador we were in this mountaintop kind of small community, and there was a stream between me and like where Aiden is at the back of the room there, probably like 15 feet away. And, excuse me, like where I am, there was a little path that walked beside the stream, so about 15 feet away. Well, where Donovan is here, about 10 feet away from the stream, there was an outhouse, just a little wooden building, and there was a toilet somebody had set in there, and they had dug a hole in the ground. So the toilet wasn't a flush toilet. It was just like you poop and it went down in there. It was a place for you to sit. And I was like, why in the world would you put the outhouse that close to a stream? Because you know the water underneath the ground is connected. Obviously, some of that is it seeps through the ground. It can get into the stream and then we go downstream from there and affect other people. I don't know why they didn't move it farther away. But there's got to be a better way that we teach people and educate people about how to, even in poor conditions, like how can you better reduce your chances of getting sick, okay? And then the last one, we're good here. Where are we? Number 62.
Like that, we can get the end of 61.
61, leading to havens and opportunities for the spread of infectious diseases. So when you don't have sanitary waste disposal, when you don't have clean drinking water, you're going to lead to the spread of diseases to people. It's just that simple. A lot of diseases are waterborne, and they're transferred easily through bad drinking water or untreated drinking water. All right, the last one, the plague. We also might call it the Black Death, bubonic plague, blah, blah, blah. Killed a bunch of people, and in case you didn't know, it's still around. So last year, I know there was somebody or a couple people in Colorado that got the plague. Now, they got treated and we're all better. There were a couple people last year that I know died in Mongolia that died from it. Now, why would you think the people in Mongolia died and the people in Colorado didn't?
Because the people in Mongolia got terrible air quality.
Yeah, healthcare, and probably maybe they were too far away to get any care. I mean, it's pretty remote in some locations. So the plague is carried by organisms infected with plague bacteria. It's transferred to humans via the bite or through contact with contaminated fluids or tissues. So I think the ones that had died in Mongolia had killed some marmots. You know what a marmot is? Mm-hmm. It's like a groundhog over there.
Oh, yeah,
What?
I know what you're talking about.
I don't know how loud they are, but I know they look like groundhogs. You find them in like rocky mountainous areas. Anyway, and so I think they had killed some to eat, and then when they were cleaning them and dressing them and preparing them, I guess they had got some of that bacteria. They got the plague, and they died. So this is still around. Fortunately for us, we have antibiotics to kill bacterial infections. So, yes. Thank you, America. Yes.
When the plague outbreak, didn't when at first when the plague outbreak back in the